After an hour, the van came to an abrupt stop, and the back doors were yanked open. He looked out at an enormous stone building, lit by powerful xenon arc lights and encircled by a rusted 10-foot-tall chain-link fence. Beyond the fence lay only darkness and barren desert. With a stifling feeling of dread, Mark realized he knew exactly where he was. Two men unshackled his hands from the floor, grabbed him by the elbows, and frog-marched him to the entrance of the building. "What am I being charged with?" "You're not being charged with anything." Someone gave him a sharp push. "It's your friend you have to worry about." "What friend?" Daria Buckingham sat huddled on the concrete floor of an unbearably hot cell, her arms wrapped around her knees. Stone walls, grimy and black from the hands of previous prisoners, enclosed her on 3 sides. Boyishly slender, she looked much younger than her 32 years. Mark approached to within a few inches of the metal bars that formed the 4th side of the cell. The only light came from a single bulb, which dangled from a thin electric wire. The nearby cells were empty and the guards had disappeared, although Mark assumed they were close. A small video camera sat on a tripod right outside the cell. The recording light was on. Daria stood up, wobbling a bit because the heel from one of her black leather pumps had broken off. She wore a pleated black skirt and a frilly, short-sleeved silk blouse. Her face was smudged with dirt. "Jesus, Daria." "It's a long story." She held her head high and tried to smile, but her attempt at bravado wasn't convincing. "You okay?" "I'm fine." Her face, ordinarily striking, marked by high cheekbones and a wide, pretty smile, was distorted with lines of worry. "What are you doing here?" "What am I doing here?" Gorbistan prison was a strict regime prison that housed many of Azerbaijan's criminals and political prisoners. Mark knew Daria was neither. She was a CIA operative, and a privileged one at that, the daughter of wealthy Washington diplomats, a product of Duke University and Georgetown Law. "They're holding me as a suspect." "For what?" Mark took a step closer to her and lightly gripped the metal bars of the cell. "You didn't hear?" He slowly shook his head. "Wasn't it on TV?" "I got rid of my TV." She approached the bars of the cell and placed her hands over his own. "Jack Campbell was assassinated," she whispered urgently. Mark remembered a competent, uncontroversial Deputy Secretary of Defense who had served for 2 years and retired over a decade ago. "Where?" "Here, in Baku at the oil convention. Shot in the head." In years past, Mark had always attended the big annual International Oil and Gas Convention in downtown Baku. But this year he'd forgotten that it was even taking place. "It happened this afternoon around 4. At 4, Mark had still been at the beach with Nika and her 9-year-old son, helping to build an enormous sandcastle. When they'd finally left, Nika's son had asked to listen to a Russian pop music station on the car radio. After knocking back 4 beers on the beach, Mark had been game for anything. No one had bothered with the news. "He was here for the convention. Somebody killed him a couple of minutes before he was supposed to give his speech." Daria paused. "I was alone with him when he was shot, Mark. Standing right next to him, in one of the back rooms off the stage. It was awful." Mark stared at her for a moment. "Why were you alone with him?" "I was assigned to be his translator." She relayed the details of the shooting.